known equity essential.
Thank you very much. I have done not a lot, but I've done a fair amount of public speaking in my life, and I have to tell you that nothing I've ever done is as humbling as being on this stage right now after listening to these men and women all afternoon. When I was in the audience just now, I was thinking, I wish everybody I love and everybody I don't love could be here and listen to what we're hearing today. In many ways, it's an affirmation for what we're all doing, and I mean every one of us. And so I salute San Quentin for opening up to let us listen, and I salute the incarcerated men here who have shared their lives with us. It's really a gift, and I hope you can all go out after this is over and share it with the rest of the world. So I had planned on talking in part about how rotten the criminal justice system is and how we all have to change it, and I deeply believe that, but I don't feel the need at this moment to repeat that, although I hope my comments underscore what others have said before me. Public safety is critical. We do need a criminal justice system, and ours is broken. I don't think I need to convince anybody here of that. So I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about how we engage the world and how we educate the world about criminal justice so that is it a political issue as healthcare or the economy or the Middle East? How do we create a sense of national urgency about criminal justice reform, which basically, until very recently, was never discussed politically, except if you're tough on crime? So how do we get there? And to do that, I want to step back a little and talk about somebody who was incarcerated here at San Quentin in the 1960s, and his name was Eldridge Cleaver. People here probably remember him, or at least know the name. He was a prominent member of the Black Panther Party, and one of the things he wrote was, this was the 60s, it was a time of great social fervent. He said, there is no more neutrality. Either you're going to be part of the solution or you're going to be part of the problem. And I think that today that's almost a cliche we can see on a poster, but if we just stop and pause and we think about our own lives and people we know and how we engage in the world, I think it's a very relevant comment, which I'll get back to. So my own background, how did I get here and how did I become a criminal justice reformer, as Philip said? I grew up in a fairly typical middle-class, privileged home. When I was 4, my family moved from the Bronx, which was the city, to Long Island, which at the time was a growing suburb outside Long Island. My dad was a lawyer. He did insurance work and negligence work by day, but at night he was a member of CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, the civil rights organization. And at the time, Long Island was booming because all these working class families were moving from the city to pursue what? The American dream of home ownership. But guess what? There was a group of people who did not enjoy that benefit. And time and again, people found that black families were being turned down when they wanted to buy a home. So my dad teamed up with a reporter from Newsday, one of the local papers, and they would pose as a couple wanting to buy a home. And then a black couple would follow them or precede them, going to the same builder or seller. And time and again, my dad and his partner would find that the home was available, and the black couple would find that it wasn't. This was the North, this was the 60s. So exposure transpired, and there were articles written, and a lot of good was done of that. I think the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, in part because of things my dad and others did in these kinds of exercises. And I remember one day my dad organized a busload of demonstrators because there was a guy in our neighborhood who would not sell to an African-American family. And he brought these people with pickets. There were big signs, and they were loud, and they were multiracial. And I remember, needless to say, our neighbors did not receive these people with open arms. And I remember feeling this strange sense of embarrassment and pride simultaneously, as a kid can do, at what I was witnessing. But today, looking back, I realized how fortunate I was that one of my role models was actually acting out of courage right in front of my eyes. And I was very fortunate, and I'm sure what I'm doing here today relates back to that. In the 1970s, I went back to high school in New York, and in 1974, there was a case, again in a northern city, Boston. A federal judge mandated that Boston schools be desegregated. Boston, as you may know, then and now is a very segregated city, as is New York. And the reception of mostly the black kids in these white neighborhoods was vicious. There was violence, particularly in a neighborhood called South Boston, a tough town. And one of our teachers says, why don't you guys go and find out what's going on? And a group of us went by car and with video cameras to film. And we went to Roxbury, which was the black neighborhood, talked to black kids, and went to South Boston, talked to the white kids. And I would say for the first time in my life, I saw with my eyes sort of naked bigotry and raw ignorance. And at one point, one of my friends said to the kids, they were spewing racial epithets, and they said, had you ever, before busing, had you ever met a black person? And they said, no, we hadn't. And there's a pause, and then there was a girl down on a stoop, and she says, you know, I got to know some of them, they're not so bad. And it was dead silence. And then the crowd, there's no violence, but they turned on her and called her a nigger lover on camera. And then there was just silence. And so we turned this into a documentary, a film, and we distributed it. We were kids, but it was another sort of step along the way. So when it came to choosing my career, I chose journalism because I had seen with my eyes the power of journalism and the power of prejudice. But as people here know, we don't always chart our careers perfectly, and I became a business reporter. That's where the jobs were at the time. And I worked hard, and I did fine, and eventually I went to Wall Street. I became a financial analyst and then a hedge fund manager. And for 15 or 20 years, I worked. I put my nose down, I had my blinders on, and I read nothing about anything but finance, and I lived my life. And I was, you could say, a pretty average, typical professional. Finally, I retired about 6, 7 years ago, and I decided to reacquaint myself with the real world. And I was very lucky. I was living in New York, and I met really smart people who were into education reform and immigration reform, and time again, coming back to criminal justice and all the things that had happened since I was basically stopped paying attention 20, 25 years earlier. And so what I learned was what would come as news to nobody in this room, but some of it does bear repeating. And one of the real takeaways I've had from this whole experience in criminal justice world was, think of all the things we incarcerate people for today that 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago we didn't. Drug addiction, it's a health issue. Mental health, alcohol addiction, kids getting into fights into school. Now we have police and they're going from the classroom to the prison. Immigration detention, we're building this huge, so we have the default in our country for the last 30 years has been to throw people behind bars. And there's complicated reasons for this, and they're very hard to solve. And people have spoken to them, and people smarter than I before me, and hopefully after will address some of that. But what I realized was the problem was not the reality, which was bad enough, but that there was absolutely no sense of national urgency. Where is the outcry on a daily basis? And then, of course, I looked at the mirror, and I said, what have you been doing? I hadn't done anything wrong, but I hadn't done anything right either. I'd become, on nice vacations, I'd raised a family, I'd become basically an average American, a typical American in many ways. But I felt there were millions of people like me who, if they could learn and know what was going on, would care. And going back, the power of journalism. I've always believed in the power of reporting, the power of storytelling. And so thus was born the idea for the Marshall Project. Because what we needed, I concluded, was not only some of the work that we've heard about that is going on inside this prison and outside, but we need a national conversation. We need to create a sense of urgency, and for me, one of the best ways of doing that is stories, is investigations, is bringing the reality to the people. And our history, our very recent history, is full of examples of where journalism had a powerful impact. Think of the Vietnam War, where reporters, men and women, would go and do nothing more and nothing less than write what they saw, and which was, in the time, we were not really winning the war. And those pictures and those words helped turn public opinion against the war. Or think of the civil rights movement. And think about how critical it was that you had reporters on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma in 1965 as the demonstrators were coming over the bridge and getting their rear ends kicked. And that also had a huge impact on the way Congress and the North saw what was going on in the South. So journalism, to me, is really an amazing vehicle for social change. So what is the Marshall Project? We launched about a year ago. The Marshall Project's a nonprofit journalism organization. We rely on the support of foundations and individuals, and we do investigations about prison conditions or juvenile justice or immigration or the death penalty. We have a daily email called The Opening Statement, which has become indispensable for many people who are professional in the field. And we have a section called Life Inside, a weekly column, which is written, as it suggests, about what is going on inside. And today, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to go on our site, we have the second article by San Quentin's very own Rahsaan Thomas. And he's not the only one. We have a lot of writing from incarcerated people. And I have to pause here because yesterday our editor, Bill Keller, and Kelly Payne, one of people from our staff, visited with the San Quentin News. And I don't really feel I need to justify the Marshall Project or to justify journalism, but meeting with that team of men who are who were peers and who debated with us and we exchanged ideas was so amazing, because I think in a microcosm what the San Quentin News does here, and I understand outside here where it gets to be distributed, is very analogous to what we're trying to do. And so I don't think there's anything more powerful. If you really want to understand the Marshall Project, take a look at the San Quentin News. So I feel we are having an impact. I talked about some of the things we've done. Our editor, Bill Keller, interviewed the President of the United States several months ago, and he talked about criminal justice reform. He talked about Black Lives Matter for the first time. He made national headlines. So I'm very proud of what we're doing, but obviously we still have 2.25 million people behind bars. There's still vast laws that need to be changed. Our work is only beginning. So where does that leave all of us here? As I started saying, this audience does not need convincing from me to be engaged or to really care about this issue, because I think we're all, if we weren't this morning, by this afternoon, we're all going to be deeply passionate about it. But still in all, I just think that there are things, if you're a philanthropist, I think you've seen so many amazing organizations, people working with the incarcerated, the formerly incarcerated, and doing reporting that need our support. If you're an employer and you hire a formerly incarcerated person, you are changing a life, and you may be saving a life. So there's all sorts of things we can do. I want to go back to my dad. He's 85 years old now. He lives in Tucson, Arizona. And since leaving Koch in the 1960s, he's never stopped doing things. And recently he stepped down from the board of an organization that represents indigent men, women, and children who are incarcerated by ICE. He's deeply proud of what we're doing at the Marshall Project, and I tell him all we're doing is building on what he did. And it's very important, and we've heard time and again today how important role models are. And as I said, I feel I'm very fortunate to have had one. So I want to bring it back again to Eldridge Cleaver. If we're not part of the problem, we're part of the solution. The Marshall Project believes that part of the solution is shining a light, is setting a spark and lighting a fire, and letting all you guys do all the other work to make a difference. And as I said, I'm humbled and gratified that I've had the opportunity to speak to everyone here, but more importantly, to listen to everyone here. This has been an amazing day. Thank you for listening. And to San Quentin and Delia Cohn, thank you for doing this. This has been a remarkable afternoon.